we recently on this channel, we talked about the idea of, how I didn't really like the Nmap section as much in the OSCP, and not even just the OSCP. I've seen a lot of content, free content out there for learning Nmap, and I just feel like it's good because it gives you a lot of different ways to do things, but I could see how it'd be very overwhelming. Even with TryHackMe, to be honest with you, a resource that I highly recommend all new people to check out. And even if you're not completely new, you could get a lot of value from the material on that site. But even them, I felt like it really, and even talking to some of my clients, it really left them a little bit intimidated and not sure where to go next. I want to show you guys some different Nmap commands that I personally use as part of my methodology. Feel free to tweak them as you will, because every pen tester's methodology is their own. I really want to drive that point home. But yeah, without further ado, I'd like to get into that as well, right? So I have, my box right here. And just going, continuing on the track with the egotistical bank thing we've been working on in the AD Active Directory, series for OSCP. Go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. My recent videos, but we're going to use that box once again, and I'm going to be showing you how I would use some manual Nmap commands to basically perform my active reconnaissance. So let's just say we're starting from the beginning, right? We don't know anything about our target server. We don't know anything about any of the services that might be running, any of the open ports or anything. We don't know what the server is being used for. Well, we want to maximize our time as much as possible. We may even consider, if we're, going up against a CTF or something especially, we may even consider not even using Nmap manually. Maybe we want to use auto recon or something like that while we work in the background. But for the purpose of this video, let's say that we want to use some manual Nmap. The first thing that I want to do is I want to check to see what this box is being used for, right? So I would just keep my Nmap command as simple as possible. I would like to specify the -v command, or TAC-V if you're a purist, right? Just so that I know what port is open as Nmap finds it. Then I don't have to wait for the entire scan to finish. I could get started just right away, right? So let's do that. And we're not even going to specify a port range, right? That way, it only scans the top 1,000 TCP ports. That's an important distinction. This will not scan UDP. We're only going to be looking at TCP first. And the reason for that is TCP, just by nature of the nature of it, is going to complete a lot faster than UDP. We're going to look at UDP later. Definitely, as part of your methodology, look for UDP ports as well. Don't skimp out on that. But usually TCP will be where the vector is, especially on CTFs, I would say. So we're going to start with this, and I would run a version enumeration because you could run without this. It's going to make the scan take a little bit longer, but I find that trade-off to be worth it, definitely. Because we want a little bit more information. If we don't provide this, all Nmap's going to do is say, okay, for example, port 80 is open, therefore it's HTTP. Or, port 8080 is open, it's probably HTTP. It's not going to do any banner grabbing to get more information. It's not going to do anything additional to determine, well, even though it's on this port, it's really this service, or it's this service, this version. As a pen tester, it could be very valuable to have that information. For example, maybe there's an FTP server running. If we run it with version enumeration, it's going to try and grab the banner, and maybe that banner includes a specific version number and software, right? So we could have, VSFTPD version 234, and we can look that up in exploit DB and come to find out that is vulnerable to a backdoor remote code execution vulnerability. So just like that, off of one Nmap scan, suddenly we have code execution, right? If we didn't use that, we wouldn't have that information. So let's include that. And we definitely want to save this to a file because we don't want to have to worry about, oh, what window was it on again? And oh no, I lost my data. So we're going to save it. We'll just call this quick. This is going to be our quick Nmap scan, and or short, or whatever you want to call it, right? And let's just go ahead and provide the IP address, and we will now run the command as is against this IP address. And another thing that we probably should have included, as part of my methodology, I would also include the TAC SC flag for default scripts. And what that's going to do is, based on the protocol that it finds open, it's going to run certain Nmap scripts. Now, if we look in the user share Nmap scripts directory, we'll find all of these scripts available, but this is going to smartly run only the relevant ones depending on what services that Nmap finds running on the server. So in that way, we don't even have to worry about, in many cases, running a lot of manual Nmap scripts. But the one exception to that is if you need to run something that's not a part of the default scripts. And typically, this tends to be stuff that's a little bit more intrusive, a little bit more, let's just say, has the potential to maybe bring stuff down in some cases, not always, obviously. Like exploits and things like that, especially, that's not going to be part of the default scripts. That's when I would need to run those manually if I was doing manual Nmap, right? But as a beginner, I wouldn't even really worry about that. If we focus on the sort of Pareto principle, the 80-20, that's definitely more in the 20%, I would say. What you need to know, the 80% is just, you should be fine with default scripts. I found that to be very helpful. So we'll just kick this one off. And as you see, because we specified verbose, it's telling us all these open ports as it found it. Amazing, right? Now what that means is I can go dive into whichever services I want while this thing keeps running in the background. I didn't even have to wait for this entire scan to complete to have that information. So that's what I would do next, right? It's always good practice to have your recon going in the background while you're working. It's the most efficient way to do it. So, I'm not going to wait for that to complete, obviously, but after I do that, the very next thing I'm going to do is I am going to take this command and just make some slight tweaks to it to scan all ports. Well, not really all ports, right? If you recall from the beginning of the video, this will be all TCP ports. We still haven't touched UDP. We'll get to that in a bit. So what that comes down to is just making some slight modifications. I would keep the TAC V. That's always up to you, but I would do TAC P TAC. And that's actually a shorthand, a little shortcut for all the TCP ports from the very first port through 65535, which is the highest port they can have. So that's going to scan all of those. And then I will save it as a separate file. We'll call this one full, and then we can kick it off. And, from the start, it looks pretty much the same. We're going to keep the version enumeration and the default scripts because, that's very handy to have. Obviously, something like this is going to take a lot longer, so this is definitely nothing that I would wait to complete. I would just set it and forget it, come back to it later, right, and see what the results are. We already, at this point, have so many ports that we know are open that we could start enumerating and seeing where we can, go from there. Maybe in a lot of cases, you don't even end up paying too much attention to the full scan because maybe you already get the shell without it. But I have forgotten that it was there many times when it came back to bite me later. So definitely something, especially you want to make sure you're saving it to a file so you can reference it later. Now, as you see here, we're already discovering some high ports that I don't believe we found before, so we're already seeing the value of it. Now, of course, the other thing we want to do is start looking into UDP. Now, like I mentioned earlier in the video, UDP is a lot slower to scan and more unreliable as well to scan than TCP, and that's just the nature. That's just the nature of UDP. The fact that it is a connectionless protocol is what makes it that way. So what we're going to want to do is we don't want to scan all UDP ports for the simple fact of it's never going to complete. That's going to take forever, right? So instead, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to stick to maybe the top 1,000 or even less than that if you so prefer. And it's really up to you as a pen tester how many UDP ports you want to actually scan. But I would say for starters, I wouldn't recommend scanning any more than 1,000 UDP ports. Remember, you could always rerun your UDP scan to include more ports if you want to. But for starters, for my methodology, I would use something like Nmap TAC SU, and this is critical here. This is what specifies to Nmap that you're going to conduct a UDP scan. So any of the ports that you run this against, now it's going to be looking for the UDP ports of that. So I'm not even going to specify a port range. So, if you recall, that's going to automatically just scan the top 1,000 ports. I still find version enumeration to be extremely helpful for the same reasons as it's helpful in the TCP scan. So we're going to use that. And then we're going to save it to a file. Usually I call it something like UDP. And we just provide the IP address. So, yes, very important here. I probably should have done this with my other... I definitely should have done this with my other commands as well. If you're running as a standard user account, you're going to want to run these commands as root because it includes special privileges that are required for certain things. Now, when it comes to UDP, that always requires root privileges. So it's not even going to be able to run. It's straight up going to tell you like, hey, you need to run this as root. So going back, I probably wanted to modify those previous commands to have sudo in the beginning, just in case there's certain things it might miss just because it's not able to do that with the privileges that you have. So always run these Nmap commands as root. And as a security guy, I don't say that very often about a tool, always run it as root, but in this case, yes. So just to really, for you visual people out there so you can see what I'm saying, this full, we go back to the quick scan. You probably want to run it like this. Go to the full scan. Same thing. Where is it? I don't know what happened to it. But you get what I'm saying, right? Run this as root as well, just in case. So, that's what I would recommend for all you guys out there getting started with Nmap. And obviously for the more experienced guys, everyone develops their own methodology, their own preference for the flags to run. This is by no means the way you have to do it or anything like that. This is just what I personally use and what I would recommend to people that are overwhelmed by the amount of flexibility and choice you have with Nmap. So I would recommend getting started here. Start playing around with different flags, different options. And over time, you're going to find what you personally prefer to use. So yeah, hopefully this video was helpful. If so, let me know down in the comment section below. If it wasn't helpful, let me know as well. And I'll see you guys right in these technical videos if you want to start really taking this beginner knowledge here and expanding upon it, as I would highly recommend you to do. So I'll see you guys right over there. Thanks for watching.